You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ole Miss preseason predicted fourth in the Southeastern Conference. We'll talk about that in just a second. I'm Steven Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He's John Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report or Ole Miss on SI. We'll have to nail that down live on the air. But John, Ole Miss comes in fourth preseason in the SEC, and it's a popularity contest. We were talking about this before the show, that the logo on the side of the helmet, Bama is going to get the benefit of the doubt, and Ole Miss is not very far. If you look at votes behind where Bama is, I think Bama gets some residual folks from people that are covering the SEC from the state of Alabama. Honestly, it's probably more people from Bama than Mississippi going over to Dallas.
Yeah, I think so. I think that pretty well explains it. Because I have Ole Miss third and I have Bama fourth, just kind of in my preseason thoughts. But I mean, fourth is that's respectable, I think, right? I mean, that's you've got Georgia clear in a way the favorite to win the conference, and then you've got Texas at second, and then Ole Miss and Alabama third and fourth. LSU at fifth was a little interesting.
Yeah, that was weird.
I think that may be the logo on the helmet thing that you were kind of talking about, because I don't view LSU that highly. But then, you look at the rest of the predicted order of finish. I wrote about this as we record probably about an hour ago. The next opponent that Ole Miss has on the list is Oklahoma at 8th, predicted to finish 8th. And then it's 11 through 15 is Ole Miss's conference schedule. As far as predicted order of finish goes. So, I think that should set up well for Ole Miss. Granted, anything can happen, but, the media doesn't view Ole Miss's schedule based on this as super daunting.
Yeah, it's definitely not a hard schedule, because I did a tweet about that earlier on Friday. It was like, yeah, you play Georgia. Alabama plays Georgia too. Texas plays Georgia. The SEC championship is going to go through Athens, Georgia this year. But after that, you have I don't want to say it becomes cake for Ole Miss, because the SEC is going to be hard somewhere around 12 in their list. But it's not going to be nearly as daunting as, say, Alabama, who has Missouri and Georgia. Texas, who has Oklahoma and Georgia. Like I said, Georgia's through this. Ole Miss has one team that's realistically a real top 8 contender, because I don't know if I consider LSU at that level. I do believe the logo on the side of the helmet really stands out for LSU in this situation.
Yeah, and I do think that Ole Miss is a better team than LSU as we sit here and talk about this in mid to late July. But I am hesitant, I guess, to chalk that up as an automatic win for Ole Miss, because it's in Baton Rouge.
Hard. Yeah.
Right. That's going to be difficult. So, I do think Ole Miss has talent in its favor whenever that game comes around, but the road trip is going to be really difficult there. And two, you got to go to Columbia. That's not going to be a super cakewalk of a road trip. Fayetteville, that again, Arkansas is probably not going to be that great, but you look at
they're
it like
embracing the hog, John. They're embracing the hog this year.
That seemed a little strange, right? But we always get interesting sound bites like that from media days. But again, I do think that Ole Miss's talent, looking at its conference schedule as far as predicted order of finish goes, I think its talent is better than pretty much almost everybody on this list. But some of the road trips could get a little tricky.
Yeah, and if they're fourth in the SEC, they're going to make the college football playoff. So the media, even the way it is, thinks Ole Miss is going to make the college football playoff, which is a situation where we agree with the media. Now we're going to get to the part, John, where we refer to the media as idiots. And that is the fact that Jaxson Dart did not make an all-SEC team. First team, second team, or third team, Jaxson Dart did not appear. Jaxson Dart is the quarterback that every other team in the SEC would trade their starter for right now and would not think twice about it. Don't give me Carson Beck. Don't give me Quinn Ewers. And do not give me Jalen Milroe. They're good quarterbacks. They're really good, but they are just not on Jackson's level, John.
Yeah, I think Jackson should have made this list, but we keep coming back to popularity contests, right? I mean that can apply here as well too, because if you're looking at again the logo on the side of the helmet, that's going to give guys like Jalen Milroe a boost there a little bit. Yeah, I think Jackson is definitely deserving of a spot somewhere in this top three, but that's not the way it fell. So it's interesting, and it could be a little bit of if not necessarily for the team, for Jackson at least, some bulletin board material, because he oozes confidence in himself right now, and rightfully so. But continuing to have that motivation of proving some people wrong, I think can help him out some.
Yeah, and this I'm going to go a little bit a step further than you did. Now you have to play it down the middle with what you do. I can be a little bit more extreme with my views, and I think that what they just did by not putting Jaxson Dart, who is the identity and team leader of this team, everything about this team flows through Jaxson Dart. By not putting him on any of the all SEC preseason teams, you just did away with 6 months worth of rat poison going into the season.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't hurt that for sure. Because that was kind of some of Lane's talking points at media days too when we were with him. About how preseason accolades, preseason hype doesn't mean anything when it comes down to it. This kind of backs him up there a little bit because he's like, okay, hey, you see all these people saying how great you're going to be, how great this team is going to be, how great you're going to be as a player, etc. Apparently, they don't think you're good enough to be on this list. So, again, yeah, you're kind of right there that it can definitely serve as some motivation to kind of balance that out.
Yeah, it should be really cool indeed. Anyway, thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. When we come back, we will turn our attention towards fall camp. We're about 8 or 9 days away. I don't know exactly the start date, but it's not far away, but we'll talk about that when we come back. But first, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And you know what? I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing the way we want them to. So FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want to. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets at any time I'm in the mood. Maybe I want to bet on Ole Miss and their over-under at 9.5 wins this season, or Jaxson Dart at 1,500 to win the Heisman. Now is the chance. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, it's the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, news, opinions, all streamed 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And be on the lookout this fall as an NFL version and a college sports version is going to drop as a 24/7 streaming channel as well. Locked On's got it going on, if you know what I'm talking about. So, John, let's turn the page from SEC Media Days, which was a rousing success for Ole Miss, and it was just really cool to see Ole Miss treated during Media Days the way that we're used to seeing Alabama and Georgia get treated at SEC Media Days. And that was a cool feeling. But now it's at the point where Lane has to flip a switch, and I talked about this on Friday's show. A switch has to be flipped. The offseason's over because we always talk about SEC Media Days being the ceremonial start of college football season. Well, it's also the end of the off season. And so Lane has to get ready and everything going because this fall camp is going to be very important from the time they face Furman on August 31st all the way until their first SEC game versus Kentucky very early on. A lot of questions have to get answered and a lot of players that have to make plays.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely reaching that point here a little bit, right? I mean, it's it's still about a month from kickoff, but I mean, as fall camp nears, I mean, we're really, really getting into the nitty gritty of things a little bit. I think this is going to be an interesting fall camp for Ole Miss from a few different perspectives. I mean, we don't have a quarterback battle necessarily, unless you view the backup quarterback battle as something, which I mean it is, but
that is low key important.
Yeah, I mean that is, but you don't have one for QB1 like we have the last couple of years. But I mean, I think there's some questions that are going to need to be answered a little bit. I'm curious about offensive line rotation. I'm curious about running back rotation. I think those are two really key things that are going to be interesting to follow as far as the offense is concerned, because those two groups look different than they did a year ago, right? And that's going to be something maybe we'll learn about some in fall camp. I don't know exactly what our access is going to be yet. They haven't told us, but it should be interesting.
Yeah, it should be really good. And I talked to Brian Smith for an interview that's going to air tonight as this airs on Sunday night. He said he spoke with a college football head coach. Didn't name names, just said he spoke with a college football head coach. And he said, hey, this is a really good player, but do not be surprised if you see him play less. And Brian's like, what? That makes no sense. The play count of starting level players is going to go down because you need them for 16 games now, potentially. And if you overplay them early, that's going to make them weaker later, which could be detrimental for a team trying to win a national title. So we're in a situation in this fall camp. I think we probably need to pay attention to Kamarion Franklin and William Eccles and Jeffrey Rushers and those guys to see who can be rising up. On the offensive line, the bottom end, I think they're 10 deep at the moment on the offensive line. I think they're all going to get to play during this season at the wide receiver positions. I think that in each position group, Ole Miss fans need to find one or two more players than they were expecting to be the main core players in that group.
Yeah, I think that's accurate because, I mean, the schedule is changing, right, with the changing of the playoff and everything like that. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And when we were talking to Trey Harris in Dallas, we had a private session with the local media with some of Ole Miss's guys. He kind of hinted or insinuated that some of these younger guys in the wide receiver room are going to get more playing time than they did a year ago, which kind of plays into that point because, one, depth is just important anyway. I mean, regardless of how many games you played. But right now, especially if Ole Miss has the season that they are expecting and wanting to have, they're going to need some of those pieces in order to keep everybody fresh and healthy as well as you can. So, yeah, I thought that was a really interesting quote from him because there are some younger guys in that room that we talk about that we have seen, but are not necessarily national names like your Trey Harris, your Jordan Watkins, guys like that.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a year that we're not even thinking about it because, just to bring this up, on Twitter, we saw a picture from Oxford, Mississippi. Deion Smith put an Instagram story out of him being essentially in Oxford, and he was visiting Jaxson Dart, and there's no real secret of why he was visiting Jaxson Dart, but nobody's going to talk about it, and that's fine. But this stuff in Deion Smith, and you have Juice Wells, who was prominently positioned during production day. We saw him a good bit in social media, and then Jordan Watkins and Trey Harris and all of those guys. Caden Lee is a person that Trey Harris just volunteered information. It's like by the middle of the season, everybody is going to know who this guy is. Well, just listening to what I'm talking about, we're 6 or 7 deep in the wide receiver room, and before we even started. And I don't think it's a lip service thing like what we got over the last couple years when it's like, hey, are we going to throw the ball to the running backs this year? Where that was kind of the theme of camp, and they never did. I don't feel like this feels like that.
No, I don't think so. I think you're right there that this feels genuinely like they are, like you said, 6, 7, however much deep at wide receiver. And that's a really, really good place for them to be in. I mean, that analysis, right? But I don't think that can be understated how important that is, because injuries happen. Okay, I mean that's going to happen. Being able to have guys who can step up and fill some of those roles, I think, is going to be huge in a season that is now longer than it previously was. And with the way the conference schedule is looking and everything, there's probably going to be some wear and tear on some of these guys. So it's going to be important to have some of those lesser known names ready to go whenever that time comes.
And, before we get out of here, what position group, what fall camp storylines are you looking forward to this year?
Personally, I am really interested in the running backs, right? And I haven't heard a lot of people kind of share that opinion, but I'm really interested in the running backs because, obviously with Quinshawn at Ohio State now, I think the running back room is going to be pretty good. I don't really pull any punches with that, but I am curious to see how often they rotate and kind of what that rotation looks like a little bit.
I think it has to look like it did in 2020 and 2021.
That's kind of my assumption too. That's kind of the feel, but I don't know. I'm interested to see kind of what that looks like, and just to kind of see some of these guys in an Ole Miss uniform at that position, kind of doing their thing.
Yeah, I asked them the questions this week of storylines going into fall camp, and I'm going to continue next week talking about that. Like I talked to Tom Vanderford, and his video aired yesterday. He was real interested about the safeties. Now, there's a lot of safeties, but he doesn't know who the safeties are going to be. You're mentioning running backs, and hey, Logan Diggs picked out number 22, which anytime an Ole Miss running back bows up and takes that number, I'm going to take notice of that guy. And I know that he is not going to start the season playing because of ACL type stuff, but him having the confidence to do that, yes, I'm going to pay attention to the person wearing Dexter McCluster, Deuce McAllister, and Due Innocent's number.
Yeah, that's a bold move a little bit, is it not? I mean, that kind of oozes confidence in itself. And, going back to one of the previous points we were talking about, him potentially being fresh later in the season after not having been able to play in the early portions of the year, I think that's going to be key for this offense. I really, really do. I think some people are going to be, I don't know if surprised is the right word, but people are going to take notice of that whenever he takes the field and doesn't have the same amount of tread on the tires as some of these other guys.
Yeah, and I don't – if it comes down to the Mississippi State game, and all of a sudden you see Logan Diggs running out there playing running back, don't freak out because he's doing it, because if Ole Miss is going to make the playoff, I'm not sure, but he gets 4 games to do it. So the Mississippi State game would kind of make sure that everything is going to happen. But, yeah, I like Logan Diggs as running back. I think if he was 100% healthy, he'd be the best running back that Ole Miss had right now. As it sits, Ulysses Bentley IV, he got all conference, all SEC. And, you have Rashad Amos and you have Henry Parrish, who, as I referred to Henry Parrish, he's just a guy that keeps the trains moving on time.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, right? I was a big Henry Parrish guy when he was in Oxford to begin with. I really liked his game. So, I mean, Ole Miss fans should be pretty familiar with what he brings to the table.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and thank you very much for tuning in. John Macon Gillespie today joined us from the Grove Report. Thank you very much. What do you got going on this week?
Well, we're going to be, I guess, putting a bow a little bit on media days. We've kind of done that now, and we're going to be looking ahead to fall camp. I mean, that's really the time of year that we're getting into. It's going to be really interesting. Jackson Harris is going to be on hand for us at fall camp, handling those day in day out type availabilities, whatever that looks like. I don't know exactly what we're going to have yet as far as availability from the communications department, but it should be really fun, and we're getting close.
Awesome. Should be a lot of good times, and everybody tune into the Grove Report or Ole Miss on SI. What's the official branding for your site now, man?
It's Ole Miss on SI is the official branding now. It was a network wide brand change where kind of leaning into that SI brand a little bit more with all the sites on the network.
Well, go check them out there. They have all the fall camp information you could possibly want, and plus I'm on there as well. So, John, thank you very much for stopping by, and we'll talk to you next week, bud.
All right. Thank you, Steven.